6:39 p.m. We will call this meeting to order and begin with the salutes in a moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dietrich,
Here.
Mrs. Donahue,
Here.
Mr. Rowling, Mr. Johnston,
Here.
Mr. Knopf, Mr. Koch,
Present.
Ms. Lynch,
She went home to get online, but she's not on yet.
Mr. Scholes,
Here.
Mrs. Smith,
Here.
6 members present.
Okay, thank you. Before we get started here, I'd like to provide a very quick 60 seconds or less update in regard to the safety concerns that were brought up the other couple of meetings back. I would like to let everybody know that we've had a couple of meetings on that subject. We have the next steps, which will include asking for support of our local judges and other personnel from our courthouse. And we will be asking them to help us to develop a go-forward plan. We will put some initial aspects to that plan together prior to meeting with them, and like an outline of the plan. And following the discussions with the judges and the members of the local courthouse, we will have one or more public meetings on the subject to bring everybody up to speed in regard to where we stand and to get comments from the public in regard to those concerns. So far, I feel positive about the direction we're headed there, and I'm happy with where we're headed. I think hopefully the public will be as well when we get to that point that we start to have the public meetings. That's it. The first couple of things we have on the agenda are a budget update and achievement update. We'll start with the budget update.
So the budget update we're presenting to you tonight was also shared with the Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday. It's just a status of where we are in developing the budget for the 2023-24 school year. And so Joni will take it away.
Okay. The first slide is the timeline for the budget milestones. We are actually on course with reviewing the budget development as we proceed down the timeline. The next slide is, again, I'm just going to show the general fund balance as of 6/30 with the 17 million. I did want to also add that the unassigned balance is at 8%, which is a very average for the size of the school district and our balance. And it's a very healthy budget, somewhere between 8 and 10%. So it is a very healthy budget. Also wanted to remind you that there is a separate capital fund versus what we have committed in the Fund 10 for capital projects. The next slide will indicate, again, we've updated numbers. As we continue to update the numbers and project out for 23-24, this is a snapshot of what we have revised as of now. As you can see, there is a shortfall of $822,437 projected out for 23-24. And that is with no tax increase.
This also, just a point of information, also represents zero change to the basic ed funding and special education subsidy we receive from the state. It's budgeting that as flat because we do not know what those numbers will be. And typically we do not know those numbers until after this board is required by law to pass a budget. So it just assumes flat revenue.
Missing, we have decided to handle our money through our bank, First National Bank, a little bit differently than what we have in the past, which will provide us with some interest-bearing checking accounts.
Correct.
And those numbers are not reflected here.
No.
Right.
Correct.
And if they would be, that red number would probably be something like a positive 500,000, just so that the public is aware of that.
And I'll review that. I have another presentation
Okay.
under investment options,
Okay.
and I'll go ahead and review those
Okay.
strategies at that time, but yes. Then if you flip the slide to the 50% tax increase, again, this is allowing, or if you would approve a 50% tax increase, Elizabeth did ask if what that dollar amount would look like for the median assessed value, and that would be about $36 additional. If
The
there were to be
average
a
taxpayer.
50% tax increase.
For the average
For
taxpayer
the
in
average,
Clinton
yes, for the
County.
median assessed value for the average taxpayer, yes. That would equate to about $36.
And that 50% is 50% to the Act One index, which
Yes.
is 5.1%.
The next slide shows the 75% tax increase. And again, the median assessed value, or for the average taxpayer, that would be about a $55 increase. And again, you can see in 23-24, then you would have a positive number, but again, the out years are still averaging quite a heavy deficit in the out years. And the last one is the 100% tax increase. This would average about, for the average taxpayer at the median assessed value of about $73 of increased tax. There you see the 23-24 is about $362 and 527. Again, the out years don't look as bad, but again, they do produce a deficit.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's important for full honest disclosure to the public,
Mhm.
for them to realize that our budget forecasting tools, based on actual past performance, shows that we do a very, the tools do a very poor job of predicting budgets beyond the next year. If you look at past history, you'll see that lots of red in years 2 through 5 on these charts and graphs that we provide to the public. And you will see in past history that we have not raised taxes for years, actually, even though, according to these charts and graphs, this school district should currently be bankrupt. Okay, so just for full public disclosure and honesty, these forecast tools that we use do a poor job of forecasting our budgets beyond the next year. It's important to note that.
I would say it was a tool that we've always used. And so I think that to remain using that tool going forward, it allows from stability and allows us to trend accurately. We haven't yet done all of the calculations under consideration. So we are still looking at the operating budgets. We're looking at the healthcare rates, and they are trending upward. So we have to take that note into consideration. Also, in the past 3 years, we've also received $15 million of ESSER funds. So we had that to take into consideration to help balance the budget as well. So trending forward, we will not have those dollars. So we do need to take that into consideration. Also, as we did mention, one of my other presentations is investment opportunities. Again, that's to help raise what we could do, to raise potential revenue to kind of also counter and offset the deficit.
If I may add something here, to add to our problems, the Pennsylvania system of supporting education has been declared unconstitutional, and who knows what the state legislature is going to do at this point, and that adds to the difficulty.
Agreed. I guess we have to see where that will end up, but it is a good sign, and I think it is a good win. And hopefully we'll see something very
But
positive.
you can't bank on dollars you don't have. And I think,
Absolutely.
David, you're saying it's a poor tool. I think the tool is intended to do what it's doing. It's just understanding what goes into those factors. And I think it would be very dangerous to count on money that we weren't positive that we had. Because then the story can flip the other way pretty drastically if situations change. So just understanding it and understanding what goes into it. And if the board desires to use a different type of budget forecasting, then I think we could talk about it. This one tool's not meeting your needs. What tool would? What information would meet your needs if this is not what you desire?
Well, I don't think
Is
whatever
this
tool you
outdated
use.
Software? Is it?
No, it's what goes into it. And that's why you
Okay.
have the assumptions at the top. So if you go, Chad, would you please go back to the zero tax increase? So this slide shows you that right now where we are with what we know for a fact on expenditures for next year, or it like for the PSERS calculation, you see at the top where it has the assumptions. So there's certain numbers that are in there based on past history of what we could comfortably project. The PSERS rates are fixed because we know what they are. So and the numbers in the out years are based on the current staff model. So if we have 510 employees, all of those out years account for the same 510 employees. Now, we all know that employees turnover, change, and so forth. But when you're making those predictions out, you can only predict with what the exact information you have now. So we know that those out years are going to close and the closer you get to them, the more accurate they become. It also assumes that expenses are going up with salaries, with benefits, with insurance costs, with inflation. It also includes the fact that so you can kind of track increase in expenses. What you can't track is increased revenue unless you show that there's a tax increase. So if you go to the next slide and you assume a tax increase for 1 year at 50%, that's a one-time revenue. That one-time revenue in the following year is added to the revenue, which makes the following deficits lower, but it does not assume any tax increases in out years. It's a one-time 50% tax increase. What the tool is meant to show you is that by different levels of tax increases, what the bearing would be in out years on the revenue side, knowing that expenses exceed revenues, current revenues. Does that help a little bit, Rick?
Mhm.
I think the other key thing to understand the slide, and Joni mentioned that, is that the ESSER grant funds need to be expended by the fall of 2024. And so we can't count on those revenues in out years. And currently those revenues were allowed to supplant current dollars, which is unusual for grant funding, but it was, fortunate for us. And that also explains why we've been able to push out a surplus in the last several years higher than what we had previous years because of the supplanting. And because of that, we are able to have a higher fund balance to which we've committed funds for out years. One example of that would be, we know that we purchase an awful lot of technology using ESSER funds, federal dollars. When you purchase the number of Chromebooks and the number of smart boards that we did across the district at one time, they're all going to start to be end of life about the same time. So while we've budget in the out years for a device replacement cycle, we may have a year where we exceed the equipment replacement cycle budgeted for because of that bulk of equipment going end of life, which is why we budget an extra $1 million in the for that emergency year in the out years. So here's where we are. We're not, we went through the last slide, right? Did you get to the last slide? Okay. Oh, this one is the one you wanted to go to.
Yes, actually, we were there.
Okay.
And the last comment would be, there will be a presentation later regarding the investment opportunities that the school district has recommended to move forward with.
So we are required by law to come in with a balanced budget. And so that could be depending on whether the board lands, whether we need a tax increase or not a tax increase. And again, the investment opportunities and the revenues also come into play.
Questions? Okay. Next item up is the achievements update.
So the achievement update is going to be provided by multiple directors this evening, and we do this annually to kind of give you an idea where we are with achievement and growth. Is that the team approach?
Well, good evening, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be able to provide you with a yearly update on our achievement. So we're going to be looking at the state assessment measures. So that would be our PSSA state assessments, our Keystone scores, as well as, and that would, this state assessments are from the last year's 2021, 2022 school year. We'll be looking at growth data from this year, so you can see where students are growing. And that those come from our local assessments, which are called AIMSweb, and the NWEA MAP assessment. So we assess both in reading and math. We'll look at on-track measures, college and career measures, and these are all things that are found on what is now the Future Ready PA Index, which is basically like a school report card. So we put together the slides in a manner that if you look at that very first, that blue bar is going to be the state average. And so we'll start with elementary. This is third grade PSSA. So all the other colors there are elementary schools, and you'll see that some are above, near, or slightly below the state average. So reading and math scores are demonstrated here. PSSAs are taken grades 3 through 8 in reading and math. And then they're also grade 4 and grade 8 would be our science assessment as well. So moving on in progression, our fourth grade PSSA, and you'll see some similar results that that blue bar is the state average. We had some schools that performed above, schools that were close, and schools that in some areas would be a little bit lower. So this fourth grade was a science year, so you have ELA, math, and science. So if we reflected on those elementary scores, in many areas, our scores were close to state averages. Specifically, Renova and Woodward Elementaries exceeded the state average in math and ELA in third grade. Woodward and Mill Hall Elementaries exceeded the state averages in ELA, math, and science in fourth grade. Liberty Curtin and Robb Elementaries have addressed areas of growth in their individual school improvement plans, and we are making progress toward meeting those goals. So you can see different schools have different strengths in different areas, and we're working collectively to try to make sure that all schools are improving in areas so that there's hopefully those scores will look consistent as we move forward in future years. So starting with the secondary, fifth grade would start at the middle school. ELA, math, again, that blue bar represents the state level, and then you can see the performance of the two middle schools, ELA and math. I'm sorry. Yep. So looking at sixth grade, ELA math, again, we're real close to the state average. Seventh grade, very similar. Eighth grade is I would wish I could say it was similar, but it's not as similar. So we have some discrepancies in performances between the two buildings and this specific grade level. Also with this grade level, they have the science measurement in grade 8. Keystone scores, again, that blue bar represents our state averages. So you can see at the high school, that would be your Algebra 1, 10th grade English, and biology. So our Keystone scores look fairly good compared to the state averages. And that green bar is our middle school, which they do a really good job identifying students early, putting them into Algebra 1, and they have a really high success rate there. So some reflections on grades 5 through 8. In many areas, our scores were close to state averages. 5th grade math scores at Bucktail Middle School were 17 points above the state average. School improvement planning efforts for 8th grade ELA, math, and science scores have been underway. We looked at schedule changes, curriculum changes, and additional staff development. Bucktail exceeded the state average for the Keystone Lit and biology exams. Central Mountain High School exceeded the state average for biology. And when we went back and looked at longevity over the years pre-COVID, our Keystone scores and some of our PSSA scores are back to or exceeding that pre-COVID test score now. One of the other identifiers that's not on here that we looked at the middle school level was the writing component. So when students take the test, they have text-dependent analysis and they have constructed responses. So as a student, they have a lot of multiple choice. They get to that writing, they'll think, oh, this is just one question. They skip it. When you skip that, it's heavily weighted in that test. When they score it, it counts in multiple areas. So we found when we analyzed those scores that there are a lot of students who do well overall in the test, but because they might skip some of those writing questions, it impacts their score overall. So we have worked with the coaches, came up with some practice prompts, and we also have added writing assessments into the secondary level to try to increase student achievement, help them understand how to write responses, and right down to a kid-friendly rubric so they can understand what they have to do on that writing component.
And a large part of that too is just getting students to understand the implication of that writing prompt on their overall score. A lot of them just said, we just thought it was one question, like not understanding kind of.
So I just want to attest to the fact that I've actually seen teachers in their classrooms teaching that directly to students and explaining that the test taking strategy and how it would impact. So it's nice to hear the things that you're working on at the district level are actually, I've seen them in the classroom.
And the next piece of kind of information we're going to go over is the student growth data. So like Justin said at the beginning of the year, that PSSA achievement data was from last school year. The growth data that we're going to look at now is from this current school year. So we give our students a growth assessment at the beginning of the year in the fall, about halfway through the year in January, and we'll give it again in May towards the end of the year. And our goal in using these assessment tools is to measure the growth over time. PSSAs give us that achievement snapshot, but we're a little bit more growth focused. We want to make sure that every student is growing at a rate that we are proud of. So this data is from the fall to winter that you're going to see. And we have used these visuals of the triangles for many years now. So they probably look familiar to those of you who have been looking at them for years. But basically, our English language arts scores are on the left and our math scores are on the right. And this is kindergarten. So what we want to see here is that we want to see a growth of the number of students in the green. Green growth is good. That's just kind of the quick glance that when you see that green area growing from fall to winter, that's exactly what we want to see. By the end of the year, we want to see that green part of that triangle representing about 80% of our students. So that's our end goal. If we're chipping away at it through the course of the year, then that's exactly how we want to see it. So kindergarten is looking really, really strong in both ELA and math. And first grade, green is growing in both ELA and math. The math growth here is a little bit stronger than the ELA, but we're already having some good conversations about how we can help support that ELA a little bit stronger. And then second grade, again, green is growing, so this is good. We hope to see the spring results come in even higher. We typically, with our students, see the most amount of growth from winter to spring. So we're hoping that when we do this again in the spring, we'll see those numbers continue to rise, and that's exactly what we want to see. So K-2 uses that measure of those kind of triangles to visualize. But if you flip to the next slide, we then switch assessment tools and we go to using what we call the MAP assessment, which measures growth in ELA and math as well. It's just a different way to do that. So on this graph, basically what you're looking at is the diamond for each grade level was the projected growth that the assessment indicated. So that's what they're saying. The projected growth in third grade is the number that corresponds, and the blue bar is what was actually observed. So if you look in third grade, fourth grade, sixth grade, our students outperformed their projected growth that was projected by the assessment. So that's fantastic. In grade 5, whoops, that was math. So in grade 5, they're very close there to their projected growth. 7th grade wasn't quite there, but 8th grade was right there, and that's in math. So you can kind of see overall, we're very close, lots of areas where we're exceeding it, and other areas where we're really close. And then if we go to the next one, this is language arts, grades 3 through 8. And you can kind of see here, grades 3, 4, 5, 6. They are all right there with their meeting their projected growth, which is fantastic. Grades 7 and 8 are definitely ones that stick out on these graphs. And if you kind of remember back to the achievement portion that Justin talked about, we also had some concerns there in 7th and 8th grade as well. We're having some really good conversations about some things that we think contribute to this. And one of the biggest things is that from kindergarten till 6th grade, students get 90 minutes of ELA every day, and they get 90 minutes of math every day. Starting in 7th grade, that instructional time is cut in half because that's just kind of the scheduling model that we've used. So we're having conversations about how to maybe look at those schedules and be a little bit more efficient and hopefully increase our instructional time at those levels, because our data is showing that we need to do that, and we need to address and kind of come up with some solutions to address these areas.
Just the instructional time in the core.
Yes, and the core, and math and ELA in particular.
We're not lengthening the school
No,
day.
Sorry, not lengthening the school day.
And that's not just one building, right? That's not.
This is
centralized.
district-wide.
Okay.
Yeah, this is district. We're able to pull these reports by building as well, but this is the district combined.
Okay.
And we're also able to pull it by teacher. We're able to really disaggregate that.
By student.
By student, by teacher, by building.
And there is a strong correlation by student and attendance.
Yes, definitely. So we have some things in motion that we're hoping will hopefully improve this data by the time we do it again in the spring. But we did want to recognize that we have some areas of growth there, and we're hoping to continue to work on those.
Do you see any difference between sexes, girls and boys? in some-
Not particularly,
Mhm.
no. We do see discrepancies in some of the other subgroups like poverty levels and things like that. We definitely see the discrepancies there. But we've never noticed a gender difference, but that's a great question. So kind of in reflection of our growth data overall, our K-2 scores are looking strong, and the number of students who are growing in that green area looks good. Again, by the end of the year, we would love to see 80% of our students be represented in that green area. We are implementing new math curriculum this year, particularly at our elementary, using the Bridges Math program. We've seen a huge increase in student growth and also student engagement with math. Hearing some really amazing conversations students are having about math. And we're pretty confident that that engagement and that level of thinking that they're having to do in that curriculum is leading to the growth. Grades 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 are all meeting or exceeding their projected growth in math, and grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 are meeting or exceeding their projected growth in ELA. And as I mentioned before, school improvement efforts are underway to address those areas of growth in 7th and 8th grade. Okay. And the next part that we're going to look at is the on-track measures that are part of the PA Future Ready Index.
Christine, you're gonna have to go closer to the
Yeah,
mic.
I'll bring the mic to me.
Okay,
How about
perfect.
that?
I know it's very hard for the folks at home. I hate to keep reminding, but it's hard for them.
So the next slide, Chad, we'll have up, this is our attendance data by secondary building. And as we've alluded before, blue is where we want to be. Green is good, red is not so good. You can kind of see the projection throughout. There are some outliers in there. I'm not really sure how Bucktail High School was reported last year of having 100% attendance. It's not accurate, so I'm not sure why it was presented that way for the 21-22 school year.
But where did you pull the data from?
It's future.
The future,
Yeah.
future ready
That's a
index.
two-year lagging indicator too.
Which I
Right.
guess we should.
So the
note that,
100,
yeah.
so
it's
let's,
not-
yeah, make sure you don't know what the numbers represent.
So for attendance for the PA Future Ready Index, it's a 2-year lag of data. So even though we may have data for 21-22 school year, technically that's already 2 years old. And when we're pulling that data, we're measuring 90% of our students who are members of our population for 90 days or more. So that's how we get that regular attendance calculation.
So it must be present 90% of the time or more.
Mhm.
It's not the daily attendance rate.
So when you look at our actual daily attendance rate compared to membership is higher than this. So this is using a more stricter formula to determine this regular attendance. And you can see that the green is where we're achieving at least the state average or better. And for this year, we're close to that state average. In the white column is this year's attendance. And we're making growth, but I think it's worth noting that nationally, since the pandemic through this school year, 30% of our students for that are at least chronically absent, which means they've missed 15 or more school days, and that's nationally. So when you factor in at least 30% of those students missing 15 days or more, we're kind of right in line with that trend, actually doing a little bit better with having 20% of our students not attending consistently. When you move to the career ready in the middle, that should really all be blue or green. We do have an outlier in there of Bucktail. And that means that when we turn in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade, they have to meet a benchmark of so many criteria of artifacts to demonstrate that we're getting them ready for that career readiness, whether or not they want to go to college, what do they want to go to college for, if they want to go to the workforce, what job might meet their interests, and how can we help them achieve that. So these are all self-reporting, and so that's why I say that they should be all either green or blue. We have some work to do. We're getting there. We're very close. I imagine this year they will all be blue. And I think if not, there might be some heads.
I can say for the red for Bucktail, when you look, so starting 18-19, you saw that there was green and red, and then it's switched and it definitely got better. Bucktail was an outlier because remember that's grade 11. So it's just that cohort. So when you're looking at percentages with a class of 20, each student really, they have an impact.
There's
Excuse me, I'm
about
sorry to
25
interrupt,
students.
but we can't hear you at home at all. Thank you.
Sorry, Elizabeth.
That's okay.
So what I was saying with that career ready, so if you go back and you look 18-19, we were green and red. Then 19-20, we cleaned that up. It's blue and green. It looks good. 21-22 looks more blue. It's going in the right direction. Bucktail, just to explain what the red is there. So it's grade 11. It's based on that cohort. Bucktail having small numbers. So if you have a class size of 20, each student counts for 5%. So if you have 3 kids that, and in this case, when I went back and looked at this, there were students that were in placements, or there were reasons beyond our control that they could not complete what they needed. So they get reported as non-completers for that year, which impacts Bucktail dramatically because each student truly matters with the small numbers. So we are looking at that very closely this year to try to be able to get that back into green, but it hopefully will be in the blue. That is the goal.
Thanks, Justin. And you can see in the graduation rates, our graduation rates are good, they're strong. So we will continue to push out our graduates for both Bucktail and Central Mountain High School. The next slide looks at our elementary schools. And you can see there that we're very close to the state average. We're exceeding the state average currently for this school year. And again, keep in mind, you know, since the pandemic, a lot of our families, if our kiddos are sick or they have a runny nose, where before they may have sent them, they're not sending them now, you know, they're advised to stay home. And the other thing I wanted to point out too, when you're looking at attendance, is that any absence, even if it's an excused absence or if it's an educational trip, anything that is outside of a school-sponsored event counts towards this. So if they are within their 10 excused days that they get per school year, technically they're excused and they're not truant, but it negatively impacts our percentages. So that's why we're always really wanting to let everybody know that any absence, even though it may be a field trip or a family trip, that does negatively impact our attendance rate.
Is that only like full day absences? So like if somebody leaves 3 hours early?
No,
Or 2 hours
it's
early.
cumulative. So if they miss a half a day here, a full day there, 3/4 of a day here, it adds up. So that's why it's really difficult to get those appointments outside of the school day. But if you can, that would be super. But if you have an appointment in the morning, making sure that your kiddo gets back to school in the afternoon or vice versa. So, and that goes along with achievement, because if they're not here, we can't grow them. So we need them in our buildings in order to have our achievement also increase. So just some reflections on our attendance of what we've been doing so far. We continue to follow our attendance policies. We're reviewing them. We are getting that information out to our families. We continue to have the text alert, the email alert, the phone call alert that goes out when students are absent, and it reminds the parents to get their excuses turned in within 3 days. And our social worker has been instrumental in going out and visiting our families that we haven't seen for a while, making sure, one, that they're okay. 2, is there anything that they need academically? How can we help them? Letting them know that we miss them and we want them back in school. And then continuing on the next page, our high school special ed population 3 years ago now, I believe, was placed on a targeted school for improvement because their attendance rates were below the threshold of where they need to be. So we've been specifically targeting that special education population at Central Mountain High School, and that has continued to grow. We've collaborated with Liz Barnhart, our director of special ed, and our special education teachers to make sure that they are involved, and we're holding IEP meetings when students are absent, and we're getting them to attend the SAKE meetings as well. Which, going to the next one, SAKEs are student attendance improvement conferences that we are legally required to have after 3 absences. And so we've been looking at that. When you have that meeting, the goal of that meeting is to figure out what are the barriers that are keeping that kiddo from school, and what do we need to do? How can we support? And so when we have those, we're trying to look at really what are those barriers, and specifically how can we support that barrier. and that family to remove that barrier. And then along with that, we collaborate with children and youth and our magistrates. And we've been having a lot of really good conversations with our magistrates when our families unfortunately end up in front of the magistrate. No one wants to get a fine. No one wants to be seen in a negative light in any way. So they would present a case and the judges would typically just kind of pass it off that we weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing. So we've been having a lot of open dialogue about that we are collaborating with those families. And if we can collaborate in these attendance meetings, then their students' attendance will improve and they'll have greater academic success. So I'm going to just address to the Smart Futures. That's our program that we use for our career benchmark. It's an electronic program that allows the students to have a portfolio that they can keep track of. We start in 2nd grade and we go through 12th grade. So that's something that they can take with them. And if they would leave us, they can have access to that even if they're in another district. And if they come back to us, we can continue to build on it. And it's really nice because it's something that they can take with them through their collegiate, through their career, their jobs. And so it also has that automatic PIMS reporting tool too. So that will allow us to make sure that we're keeping accurate count of who has met their benchmark and who hasn't. And now we'll turn it over to Kurt.
A quick question on graduation rates. Do you then gather data on if they're planning college or a certificate program or a
That data,
apprenticeship or whatever?
yes, that data is collected every year. Our senior counselors collect that and then they report that. We have to report that to the state as well. So we know how many of our students are planning to attend a 2-year college, a 4-year college, or to go directly into the workforce or into the military. We have all of that data.
It's actually pretty impressive. We hear it every year at graduation time, but that may be something that we want to collect and look over a period of time, because I think it also shows a great success rate for the district and the type of programming that we have.
I can follow up a little bit on that question for CTCs. We're required to collect data as far as, are they going to a 2nd year, a post-secondary, military, into the workforce, things like that. And I collect that at the end at about this time. We'll be doing it next month with the seniors. They're just in CTC. And then we create a graph on that and we keep the records so we can see where the kids, and I like to look at each discipline to see where they are, where they're going, as I set up different agreements with different schools. So we do have that. I do have that data, and that it's actually in JOC minutes, but I can
How
get
many
the name wrong.
articulation agreements do we currently have? Do you remember?
Ooh, you put me on a spot.
I'm sorry, I thought,
It's over 100 credit, 200 credits, probably somewhere in there.
but
I don't know
different,
how many
different
individual-
institutions. I wanted to say there was,
Oh, I got 5 or 6. No, we're probably hitting 20 now.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that's been increasing over the last several years. So there are a lot of opportunities for students to go directly from not only our academic programs, but the career and tech programs, and they would get advanced credit options at different universities. And they're taking advantage of it. It's a very high
Mhm.
success
it's a
rate.
high, yeah. And the state also has something called a SOAR program, where students occupational academically ready, where we have agreements through the state with probably 400 or 500 different schools that students can take advantage of, and they're totally articulated credits when they're a senior and they meet certain criteria. They can get advanced credit. So there's many. CTC, I'll give you a little background on the achievement data. First thing we're going to talk about is industry-based learning. There's basically 2 exams. There's a NOCTI exam. That is the end of program assessment set up by industry. They dictate the test. There's a hands-on portion and a written portion. NOCTI is given in all our programs except, let's see, NIMS is given in machine trades. That's a special metalworking skill. And we do not have a test for natural resource management, but everybody else is tested through NOCTI. So what you see here is data back to 18-19, all the way to 21-22, and you see growth from 59.4% up to 87% in 21-22 of competent and advanced students. So you're talking somewhere between 70 and 80 students took that test last year. And they take the test after they hit a benchmark of 720 hours. They're considered a full concentrator in the state of Pennsylvania. So they are required to take the test. And industry professionals give it. So we give the written, it's all computer-based. And then you have an industry professional come in and give the hands-on. So that it's all judged by outside people. There's nothing internal about it. It's all outside.
It's really actually very amazing. I'm proud of all of our staff and the results that you're seeing tonight, but this is just something that is just really exemplar. When you look at the difference over the last couple of years and through a pandemic, and the increases are still there. I also want to give Kurt some credit too, because of the expectations of using the pre-NOCTI data to identify and target timely and targeted interventions and specific skill sets that students in these programs need to learn in order to achieve the proficiency rate on the industry-based learning credentials. So I just want to say this is really impressive.
And when you look at the day, I can break it down a little more. 18-19, you had 203 students totally enrolled in CTC. In 21-22, you had 503. This year, there was 552 on October 1st. And now your classes have gone up. This year, they're starting to decrease in number a little bit, just in enrollment. So you'll see some differences, but we've continually pushed it up the bar and we're getting there. But we do a lot of data on pre-NOCTI, a ton of data on pre-NOCTI tests. And every student is given a pre-test, and then our teachers build off of that test. And when you look at industry recognized credentials, they've considerably went up from 18-19, there was 146. Last year, 1,165 industry credentials were given from this facility in 11 programs. Some students, by the end of 9th grade, they have 3 and 4 in their pocket already.
Just to be clear what the industry-based credentials are, and you can see some of the icons around there, the Serve Safe, the OSHA, CPR and first aid, and some of those other industry recognized credentials. They're
And,
part of the programs, but students are successful in attaining them.
and the only way you can count them is if they're recognized by PDE, and I have a manual we go by, and then we set it into the program. And that's the only way you can recognize them. Achievement data, our work-based learning is doing exactly what we thought it would do. As you see, a growth there, a major growth in 2021 in diversified occupations. That's basically students on the academic side that want to go out to work. And they're not in a CTC, or we didn't have something they were interested in, or the program was full, but we could still get them a job. With enrollment growing, we predicted by this year that diversified occupations and the co-op would flip. And it's done exactly what we thought it would do. We have more students on co-op, so they are directly related to a program that you have on site, and they're put into that industry. So it's done exactly what we thought it would do. Today, I can tell you I signed 7 more papers for job shadows, interns, and co-ops. So these numbers, they could change every hour. These were accurate probably a week ago. Today, I signed more paperwork. Questions?
A lot of data.
I don't have any questions, but I am happy to see the CTC growing. I went through CTC. I was in cosmetology. I got my cosmetology license afterwards. I mean, it's something that I keep to this day. Not that I'm in that industry right now, but I could always go back to it if I wanted to. And I just think it's a really great program, and I'd love to see it just continue to flourish. So thank you. Well, thank all of you for that.
Just a question I read a lot of national trends of worries around middle school girls that, suffering self-esteem issues and the plummets, and that they're very positive about STEM careers until they get to middle school, and then all of a sudden, very little interest. Do you see that? Or do you wonder, what are your thoughts on this issue and what's happening? It just is
Well,
disconcerting.
Kurt can speak to this too, but
Yeah.
through the all career and technical centers across the state are required to try to seek non-traditional students related to gender. So for example, finding more males to go into cosmetology, more females to go into some of the STEM-based some labs and so forth. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Kurt. I know this is something you live every day.
In the past 2 years, I've seen steady growth in non-traditional. Haven't seen enough growth to meet the state benchmark, but I'm not alone. There's only one school in the state of Pennsylvania that's hit the benchmark. So we do different targeted activities, but when you study, I had to write an improvement plan. So when you study the students that are considered non-traditional in a non-traditional setting, the biggest thing that comes up is why they take that particular area. Like let's take a young lady that took auto mechanics. I walk in there today, there's 5 young ladies in there. So you ask, you're inquisitive, you ask questions. Most of them have a direct link to that trade in some way. Is it an uncle? Is it a grandfather? Is it a relative? There's a young lady in machine trades. I talked to her a couple of times. I was just curious, 9th grade. So I asked, and she said her father does stuff with race cars, and he has a little machine shop in their garage, and she wanted to learn the trade so she could help him. But she's very good. She's in 9th grade. She's very good at it. She's already hit a bunch of skills. She's after her first NIMS test. So when you study the data and you look at the data, there's it seems like there has to be a connection in their life earlier that made them look toward it, that made them look at that trade. And I think sometimes even then you hit STEM in some of your lower levels, and it actually just it just clicks and they see a
So
connection
what
to
could a
it.
school district do to get these
So I
ones who
think-
don't have that in their personal lives?
Yeah, and
Uh,
I was just gonna say too, I think one of the key things that we've done in the last few years is add STEM starting in kindergarten for all students. So students in K through 6, every single student takes STEM as an elective in our rotation of electives, which I think is fantastic for building interest early. And then at the 7th and 8th grade level, it becomes a true elective where they can choose. And I will say our STEM classes are very sought after, and I don't see a gender discrepancy in those interests. But I think a key part of that was the commitment of the district to add STEM, what's it been, 3-4 years ago.
3 at least. This is the fourth
yeah.
year.
Yeah, so I think creating that interest early is going to be key to making sure that there's equity in the and how many students are taking these courses and interests. Because then as they get to the high school level, I think they'll funnel differently into different paths.
The other thing that we already do, minus the COVID years when we could mix kiddos, we bring 8th graders to here during the school day so that they can tour the shops and the programs. And also then we have the curriculum nights where parents and kids can come together and tour the programs. We also have videos online of all of the programs. We did virtual tours and stuff like that as well. I think the tours help a lot based on the kids that I've talked to. Elise and Sophia are here tonight, and that's something they shared with me, last week, was that the tours were really helpful in seeing what the programs are and making their choices. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the hearing of visitors. Do we have any visitors with us this evening?
We have no visitors signed up to speak.
Okay. Next up after that is the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Just wanted to make mention tonight later on the agenda, on the personnel agenda, you'll see that there's a recommendation for the Bucktail principal, Mr. James Polito, and he actually is here in person tonight. So for the board members and administrators and folks here that haven't had a chance to meet him, give us a wave there, Mr. Polito, and we just want to welcome you. I also wanted to mention that I recently met with Central Mountain High School students who addressed the board last month regarding the length of the school day. Elise and Sophia and I, who are here again tonight, we had a lengthy but really good discussion on the school day, along with a lot of other ideas for making their school experience relevant to their interests. I also met with Bucktail High School sophomore Martin Lewis, and I see you're online again tonight too, Martin, regarding your concerns and questions around school district business, facility, and lunches, along with some school climate issues that he's identified at Bucktail. Martin and I will be following up with Mr. Evie, as well as I've some more conversations with Mr. Pasella and also Ms. Berger. Also want to remind everybody that the Keystone Central Foundation is an excellent organization. They do so much for our students and scholarships and promoting classroom mini grants and things to allow our students to do things that they wouldn't normally be able to do outside the regular budget. And so this weekend on Sunday, they're hosting a cash bingo event. March 5th, it begins at 11 a.m. at the Red Eye Sports Center, and I hope to see you there. And that's all I have for this evening.
Okay. Next up then are the committee reports. First of those would be the Facilities Committee.
All right, thank you. The Facilities Committee of the board met 2 days ago, this past Tuesday, and we discussed 3 agenda items. The first one we discussed, and I think maybe we had talked about this earlier, maybe at the last meeting, but we have reached an agreement with the parties dealing with the portable classroom that's down at Lock Haven Catholic School, which was purchased back, I think, in 1987. And it was kind of a joint purchase between the IU and I guess the district. And at that point, it was using Title I funds, I believe, for the purchase. But in the years since, it is just a regular portable classroom, and we really don't have any need for it. And the intermediate unit doesn't, really need to have it either. And it's not an appropriate use of funds for Title I now anyway. So we've reached an agreement with all the parties involved to let the Catholic school take it over and use it. So there is an agreement on there, I believe, on the agenda to deal with that. Second item we talked about was the E-rate project at the middle school. All the cables and the wiring and so on that is currently in the middle school is pretty much aged out. A lot of it has been probably is at least 20 years old. And this is an opportunity to replace the entire wiring and upgrade that so that it's up to, should be, Chad, if I'm wrong, it should make us into the future, allow us to have at least another 10 to 15 year lifespan, hopefully, that will keep us the right speed and so on that we would need for future growth in the technology area. So that is being paid for primarily. About 80% of that is coming from our E-rate grant funding, which the whole project is, I believe, costing like $600,000. And we are responsible for the other 22%.
I put the stats in there for everyone. It's a 417, 464 total project, but cost to the district following the reimbursement from E-rate is only 62,619.
Which will come out of the capital funds, correct?
Capital funds, yeah.
And so I think it's a good opportunity to get all of this wiring replaced and make us good for well into the future. So that project will start, I believe, after July 1st because of the funding stipulations and so on. But it will hopefully be done in time to start the next school year. And the major topic we talked about at the facilities meeting on Tuesday was the Liberty Curtin Elementary School project. We had with us Jeff Straub, who is our representative from Crabtree Architects Committee or Company, and he did a presentation and he presented to us a revised footprint of the proposed drawings for the elementary school that we are talking about on the same site as the current elementary, but it would be a new building. And the committee was very pleased with the way they had taken the input from the staff and the principal and so on in the building, and took a lot of their all of their suggestions and what they think would be needed in the building. And they actually came up with I think a really great drawing and was able to reduce the square footage, which is very important, down to by about 2,000 square feet. And it's still a very efficient building layout. So we were very pleased with that. And we are to the point now where we are at the end of the schematic phase, I guess it's called. And we're ready to move into the design phase. And we would like to kind of keep this project moving so that we can get it approved or bring it to the board for approval by late this year, hopefully by fall, in maybe October, November, in that time frame. And Mr. Straub said that was certainly doable in his opinion. So we're excited about it. And we'll be talking with, I guess, further with the Liberty Curtain folks at a meeting here. I believe we're looking at something for next month to present the drawings and get some more feedback from community members and PTO people and so on.
So
So-
just an update on that. Since Tuesday, I did have some email conversations with Polly as well as Brett Umpenhauer about selecting a date for that. And we're kind of looking at early April. So we'll be getting a flyer organized and getting that invitation pushed out, not only to the board members, but also to the community.
So yeah, it was a very productive meeting. We got to ask a lot of questions, and I think we're on target here as far as we go, and we'll move into further into the design phase as we get further into this year and over the summer. And I think things are moving along well, and we certainly keep everybody updated as we move through the process. So that's it.
It was a lot. But the committee's been very busy.
Yeah, it has been.
Any questions? Oh, okay,
I have a
Elizabeth,
comment.
go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
thank you. First, thank you, Jeff. You did an excellent job. And I just want to express my appreciation to the architectural firm. I feel that they're doing at or above where they've been asked for. So I feel very happy that we have them. The committee meetings are also very interactive, informative, and there's a lot of discussions that happen. And with that said, I'm not sure if I should make my comments now or later, and I'm not asking for the meeting minutes for the committee to be changed. It's just, I made comments during the meeting and they weren't reflected in the minutes, and Patty Stevenson does a wonderful job. She's only there to do a summary, but I just felt that my comments, some of them I would like at least to be expressed in the public. So then if any board members had any questions or anything, but what I'm leading up to is that it would be nice maybe if the board would be able to see what we saw yesterday and have some sort of discussion before we go too far, because I feel that their input is more important than just mine or someone else's on the committee. So that's something to think about before we go to the April meeting. And with that said, I had some recommendations. One, I wanted to see for just future discussion, washing up sinks in the 3- and 4-year-old fourth grade classes, simply because the bathroom is all the way down the hall, and mostly with COVID and everything else, so the kids can wash their hands. This teacher won't be interrupted if the kid needs to wash their hands. So inserting some sort of bathroom facility for just washing up would be wonderful. I wasn't in favor of the larger gymnasium with the stage, but the feeling was from the school that they really want that. And then with bleachers in the gymnasium. So I just think maybe if the other board members had a chance to know that and make comments. My comment about I don't like the idea of the cafeteria being in the gymnasium because the staff has to move the tables in and out, in and out. But they felt that that really wasn't an issue, okay? But I did recommend for them to consider the wall-mounted tables where they just fold up and you fold them down. But that wasn't, I don't know if any other board members would be interested in that in the future.
I thought that
Um,
the architect did address that, though. He didn't recommend those.
Sure, I understand that. I
Oh.
understand that. He said they were used, I guess, in like the 60s and 70s, but he didn't, I don't know if he really said he approved them or disapproved for them. It's just that that was his comment. I also, he did something wonderful. He's great with security, great with security. He has a lockdown area, and I just requested that he consider the committee consider moving those lockdown doors closer to the entrance. So that way, when the school is not in session, if there's a need or a desire for the public to use the gymnasium and the bathroom there, that section of the building where the classrooms are completely locked off, but that community could still use the gymnasium area without interfering or causing any problems with the rest of the educational building. So he was going to look into that, which I deeply appreciated. I also mentioned sound insulation for the gymnasium simply, and he's on top of that. So I just want to let you know that that is being looked into. I also talked about, when it says at the end of the minutes, is there anything else the committee would want? And I had mentioned the bore testing. He says they're working with an engineer right now. But I definitely am interested to see the bore testing results and the whole committee, I should say. So we know how that building site will be compatible with what's being designed. I feel that that's critically important. So hopefully we'll have that before the April meeting. That's pretty much in a nutshell. I'm not going to go any farther, but again, Patty, I appreciate everything you do, and you're doing an excellent job. I just wanted to make sure that that was out there, and that maybe before we go too far, the rest of the board and the community can have a chance to give their input before things are too far gone. So that's my input, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I think that's the whole purpose of the April meeting, to share this information with the folks in that area and get their input on all of these things. And those are items that will be certainly addressed when we get further into the design phase.
And I feel that as part of the design phase, as board members, I don't feel that we have a whole lot of perspective. I think that the staff and the employees there who we need to listen to as far as what they want to see, because they know how to run that building effectively.
I think it's important to note that we're still in the conceptual phase, and Elizabeth, I think that I agree with you. I thought the architect listened very attentively to the input that you had, and he took a lot of notes. And I think we also mentioned that a lot of those items that you brought forward were part of the next step in this design process, and that we also promised, for those of you who weren't there, that we promised the staff that we would be coming back to them for the interior design phase before they left school this year, that they would have more input. But I think with the advanced timeframe, I could see that happening closer to April or May.
And Dr. Martin, I would include custodians. and
It's the
people
whole
like
staff has
those
been
people
invited to, they
in-
have
In
been.
addition to teachers.
Thank you for
and-
adding that, but the secretary, the custodian, the paraprofessionals, the professionals, everybody there has been asked to provide input. And then what Polly and Brett and I have been working on is finding a date that was maybe even aligned to the Liberty Curtain PTO meeting night, so that the people in the community who will be using the building after school hours, as well as school functions and attending school functions, that the space meets their needs and expectations as community members. But thank you for mentioning that, because we have been including all staff.
Okay, other questions? No, okay. Next one up is the Finance Committee. Butch is not here this evening. I'm not sure if anybody else is prepared to speak to it. I did not prepare it myself.
I could just say that the key part of the meeting really was the same budget update that you saw this evening.
Okay,
And another piece would be, we talked about multiple different investment options, which are later in tonight's agenda as well.
okay. Next up then is the Personnel and Negotiations Committee. Tracy,
Yep, we have not met since our last voting meeting.
okay. Let's see, Safety and Security Committee, another one that is Butch. Mark, would you mind taking that one?
Sorry. Now we met, it was a Tuesday night. We had a very productive conversation for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. I think, Mr. Dietrich, you had sort of summarized very well at the beginning of the meeting here tonight as far as, where we're headed. I think we have a good outline of a plan moving forward to try to address some of the concerns that have been brought forward. Again, I would like to thank not only the board members for their input the other night, but also our administrative team, as well as our teachers that have been, giving input as well in terms of how we move forward. So I think we're pretty excited about the direction we're headed. It's a pretty positive conversation, which I think is great. But I think we'll be updating folks here in the very near future with some more specifics.
Okay, thank you. Next three items, treasurer's reports, financial reports, and enrollment reports. Do we need to cover them in detail or,
We usually just.
okay,
if
any
anybody has any
any
comments.
questions about any of those three? Okay. Let's see, under section G, we have a taxpayer appeal that will be coming up for voting next week. Next, we have the termination of the agreement for the portable classroom. We already discussed that. The investment plan that Jody is going to speak to.
Did you correct that typo once and I saw it was still on there, so I corrected it again. It's on the termination. Yeah, good problem.
Okay. On February 28th, the Finance Committee met and we discussed, oh,
Pull it real close to you.
okay. Better?
As long as you're
Okay.
loud, they can hear you.
Okay. We met with the Finance Committee and proposed 5 different investment strategies, which we shared with the Finance Committee. Based upon their feedback, the committee members that were present plan to move forward with 3 of those recommendations. And they are all in accordance with the Keystone Central School Board Policy 609, which is the investment of district funds. The first strategy that was recommended, as we discussed, was the use of the general fund, which is a liquid fund, about 10% of that going into a sweep account. That is actually currently happening with a 1% return, and we are going to move that into a 2% return. Again, that actually automatically happens. Once the fund balance hits $1.9 million, it sweeps into the sweep account, and 10% of it will now earn 2%. That could yield a anticipated interest earnings of about $300,000. The next step then would be to take the general sweep of that 10% and take an additional 20% and move it into a money market account that yields about 4%. This is something that's not automatic and would have to actually be manually moved. So this is watching that account, that daily cash flow account pretty much every day, anticipating when large expenditures will be taken from that account and moving it into that money market account. This could possibly yield about almost $1.2 million. The third investment strategy we discussed and also recommended was to actually locking in about $7 million into a CD at 5.18%. This is actually a guaranteed investment earnings of $372,000, almost $373,000. So the total possible and potentially investment earnings would be about $1.9 million. Now, I would say also just to note that in order for these strategies to produce these kind of interest earnings, that fund balance would have to remain that healthy balance of that 8% and the overall general balance. I will also say that we have discussed and I've followed through with those recommendations, and this is all with First National Bank. These, all of these strategies can take place on or before April 1st. And I will go ahead and report every month in the treasurer's report, the interest earnings. Any questions?
That, those earnings, you said that's like best case scenario, correct? So there's a lot of variables that could,
There's a lot of
Affected
variables.
that.
We might not have that kind of, that income that we estimated the income, the cash flow that can move from the 10% to the 20%. We
right?
may not have that cash flow to move into that money market account. What it doesn't account for, though, is potentially it might be a little more. If we invest our earnings,
Right.
then actually that money could be more. And also that third strategy with that CD, that doesn't include investing those earnings. We could decide through the finance committee, they might make the recommendation of actually moving those interest earnings out of that account and into some other type of account, maybe capital fund or wherever they choose to move those monies, or we may choose to reinvest them. So that potentially actually could be a little more.
Great.
Is that with a local bank or?
First National Bank, that's where we
First.
currently bank.
Mhm.
I also did reach out to Pliget as well. They were unable to provide us with options because they are not under Act 10. They did not follow under our Keystone Central School District policy of investments.
How about other, I mean, even to Williamsport or State Cot, because it's potential you could find somebody that gives a little better.
You could, that
rate,
would,
slightly.
that would mean probably moving all of our accounts over.
Mm.
Which would be a huge undertaking. Doesn't mean we wouldn't possibly be able to do that, but it would more than likely move every single fund that we have here at the district over to a new
Even
bank.
if it's just a CD?
Oh, a CD we could,
Okay.
a CD we could, yes, as long as it falls in the Act 10 guidelines.
Okay.
Yes, Pliget was also very comparable to the First National Bank CD rate. So
That
I
would
think
have
they're all going
required
to be
a-
about,
That would have
about the
required a policy change, and the members at the finance committee weren't interested in pursuing that option.
Pliget did negotiable CDs. And under our policy, we are not permissible to invest in negotiable CDs. So the committee could have taken that clause out of the policy, but they chose not to revisit and revise that policy. They wanted to stand as is. So that left Pliget off the table for doing any kind of investing.
Are these numbers reflecting a 12-month timeframe?
They are. Yep. And they actually are starting July 1st. We can start investing as soon as April. So we might see some of those earnings this year.
We did discuss at the finance committee meeting that, from what we were interpreting in the policy, it wouldn't require board approval. But after Joni and I were digging deeper in the policy and realized the process would be that since our board president's on the account, in order to invest the funds, the board president would have to authorize as a signer. So we thought it would just be better and more transparent to make it a board action item if you were so inclined to approve those three strategies. And that the time frame for it would actually be sooner than the 23-24 school years Joni indicated. So we wouldn't be waiting. And then within the policy, Joni does have the authority as a business manager to invest funds up to a certain, in a certain manner. So we would start sooner, even though the numbers in the memo would represent what could potentially be earnings for next school year.
It would be required to open a new money market account, again, with First National Bank. And of course, the CDs would be, an additional account that we would need signatures on. So, but other than that, all the other accounts, like I said, within the bank are already set up.
I think the first two strategies, we said they were low risk because at any point in time, if we need that money, it can be pulled back. the 12-month CD, you would not be able to access those funds for 12 months. But the funds that we selected, that the board selected to use and that we recommended has been dollars that have been sitting that we haven't touched or needed in a long time. And we have a little bit of a different cushion now than we did before. And so this is a great time more than ever to invest. And the other strategy that the committee rejected would have been a money market at a 4% through First National when the CD was yielding over 5%.
Yes, as Jackie mentioned, the first two strategies are completely liquid. At any time, you can move that money back into the general fund checking account and use that money at any time. The third strategy is not liquid. That's a locked in 12-month CD. You can't remove it. You can't add to it. It's locked in at that rate for that amount. I'm very confident that that 7 million can sit there for the year it has many years past. So we might as well, use our money to make money.
Other questions? Okay. Next item, I think, is a new contract.
Yeah, it's a contract with Dr. Beth Ann McCain for behavioral health assessment. This is something that's been part of the PCCD grants. If many of you recall, they were awarded back in the summertime. We had to submit plans for use through PDE. It has taken a very long time for them to get back to school districts across the state, to the point where they actually sent an email to all of us and said, stop asking us when it's going to be approved. But they finally have come out with approvals. And so now we would like to move forward with getting the contract approved with Beth Ann. Mark Kondo is heading up this project with Beth Ann. There's a lot of pre-work and information, and then she does a site visit to each of the schools. And then there's a set rate there at $9,600 for the whole thing to be paid for with PCCD grant funding.
Okay, questions? All right. Next section are 3 policies that are up for the first read. Any questions in regard to those 3 items? All right. Next section is recent meeting minutes. Any questions or comments in regard to the meeting minutes? Elizabeth provided her comments earlier. Okay.
Are we, just for clarification, are we asked to change the minutes to add more detail before they're voted on next week, or are you requesting a change, or with your comments, your suffice?
Elizabeth, would you care to comment on that?
Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm absolutely fine. I just wanted to make sure the other board members had a chance. No, I'm not asking for anyone to do any extra work or anything. But I appreciate you asking. So no, the board knows if they want to review the plan before April, it's up to them. If they have any other comments, I just wanted to let them know. But thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Great. Thank you for the clarity.
Okay, next section J is, let's see, bills for payments. The E-rates cabling project we already talked about. The next one, rooftop unit, I think that's come up previously as well.
Yeah, that was supposed to be on last month with the Mill Hall rooftop unit. We're not sure how I missed moving it over, but it's been talked about at length at multiple board meetings and facility committee meetings, and we need to get them ordered.
Okay, another library reading reports. And let's see, a donation from a local business. And the
middle, you missed the second, the Meadows agreement.
Meadows Center agreements.
This is a renewal. It's a 2-year agreement. If we have any students that are in that placement, that we would be responsible for their education during that time at the rate in the contract.
And let's see, last up is the food truck agreements.
So the food truck agreement has no attachment. I did want to put it on a placeholder there because I know that we discussed it at last month's meeting. This morning, David Lindsay and I had a chance to talk on the phone about the draft agreement that Joni was able to pull together. David's got a series of questions too with regard to making sure that minimize any risk to the district. Joni and David and I have not had a chance to circle up, even though David shared those in an email. So if we are able to get the adjustments to the food truck agreement document before next Wednesday morning, You may see that on next week's agenda. If we don't have it prepared, I would ask that the board would table it until the next meeting, but we'll do our best to get that to you because I know that there's some groups that would like to use that this spring.
Okay,
President David, can I just make a quick comment?
yep, go ahead.
I don't know if I remember to ask this before. Do we, please, Dr. Martin, when you're talking to our solicitor, just to make sure that if there's any policy or anything that we need to do, please let us know, okay? The policy committee, Mr. Coe, the chair. That's it. Thank you.
Yep. He's here, so he heard you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next up is personnel. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I did want to take a moment also on that personnel agenda tonight is Chad Crape's resignation as he's taken a role with another school district nearby. But Chad, I'm not sure if this will be your last meeting or not, but just in case, I wanted to, on behalf of the board and the administrative team, thank you for your service. I told you this personally, and we've come a long way with technology and the time that you've been part of our team, and we just want to thank you for everything you've done. So if you could give him a round of applause.
Anything else under personnel to highlight? Okay. Next up is the,
We highlighted Mr. Polito already, the Bucktail principal.
yes, correct, yeah. The athletics item, any questions or comments in regard to that?
Let's see.
Okay. I think we're at the ends.
I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
That's fine, okay?
Yeah.
So motion, seconded. All right.
Mr.
Meeting-
President,
Really beat
Oh,
Jeff.
yes, go ahead, Wayne.
I just wanted to point out that the next meeting of the policy committee will be this coming Wednesday, the 8th at 10 o'clock a.m.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
You know what, Wayne, that reminded me, I know I sent an email to the board, but just for everybody else, in April, we don't follow the typical schedule, the first and second Thursdays, our work session will be on the second Thursday and the voting meeting on the third Thursday in April. So admin team, you might want to adjust that in your schedules as well.
Okay, all right. Well, with that, meeting adjourned at 8:06.
Thank you very much.